Welcome back, everyone. It's time for our keynote. So today we have a keynote by Marie van Driessche. And Marie works at VPRO Broadcasting Company as an interaction designer with a focus on accessibility. As a designer, she is fascinated by how people interact with digital products and each other. So Marie's focus is to design proper, meaningful, and inclusive solutions. She also teaches UX and UI at University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Her preferred pronouns are they or she. Fun fact, she loves cooking. Actually, she loves cooking so much that her Christmas tree is fully adorned with Christmas ornaments in the shapes of food. For instance, ice cream, carrot, croissants. So today, Marie will talk a bit about websites. Websites are a very visual medium, so therefore you might think that they work perfectly for people who are deaf. But is that actually true? Marie, please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hi everyone, I am Marie. I will describe myself shortly. I am a cis white woman. I have blonde hair. I have a knot on top of my head. I have blue eyes, a very prominent yellow blouse, and I am using sign language because I am deaf. I have interpreters here who will be interpreting into English. So I'm going to talk about inclusive design today. It's more than you hear. I would like to start off with a short story first. It has to do with the GDPR. So I use the train many times to go to work, and I have a subscription, and I wanted to change something, and it took a very long time to get that sorted through chat, so I wanted to have direct contact through the phone. And we can use interpreting services, so video relay service, to call someone. And I wanted to pose my questions through my subscription. And first they said, because of the GDPR, you have to give your consent for this conversation. So I was totally okay with that. I consented, I signed yes, and it was interpreted into Dutch through the interpreter. But that turned out, the woman on the phone said that is not an option. You have to say yes yourself. So I had to say, I wanted to say, I said yes, and I signed it, and then they told me I had to use my voice to say yes. So we had a discussion about that I said I'm signing yes in my own language, and it's being interpreted, so that's complete. And then eventually I had to use my voice to say yes anyhow. And I had the feeling that something was off about this situation. But it happens a lot of times, so not only with the Dutch railways, but also with other government agencies, how they handle the GDPR and the interpreting service. So, what is being deaf? What is it like to be deaf? And of course, that means that you can't hear, but there's more to it. There are two viewpoints to being deaf. There's the medical and the cultural perspective. The medical perspective is written with the lowercase d, and it is used to describe someone who has a hearing problem. And the capital D is used by deaf people who identify themselves as a culturally deaf, and they have a soft deaf identity, and usually they use sign language. But I have to say, there's a disclaimer to this definition, who uses the capital or the small d to describe themselves, because this is a discussion right now. But I wanted to show you that there's a difference between the writing with the small d and the capital D. So deaf people who identify themselves as deaf usually use a sign language. So for example, Dutch Sign Language is my native language. But we are aware that sign languages are not a pantomime or gestural simple codes based on a spoken language. They are real languages that are visual spatial languages. We don't have a natural written form in sign language. There is a grammar and a syntax that is totally different from spoken languages, and they are heavily making use of facial expressions to convey meaning and emphasis. Usually I get this question if sign languages are universal languages. What you can see here, these are 3 ways to say yes, and actually I would have had to pick the sign for no, because the answer is no, it's not universal. So all languages are different. And so, for example, there are 2 sign languages for English. And you could actually compare deaf readers with second language readers or second language learners. So just be aware that for deaf people, we are not a disabled community, we're actually a cultural community. And so the dominant language of the country that deaf people live in is usually not their first language. And so that's something to keep in mind. And we fall in between communities, the disabled community and the hearing community. We stand in between because we don't need physical adjustments whatsoever. It's more a cultural and a linguistic adjustments that we need. I get many questions about deaf people, and this is one of them, that they say deaf people can read our content, so it's fine if it's written, but that is not the case. And that's because Dutch Sign Language is not the same as written Dutch, and the same goes for British Sign Language compared to written English. Those are different languages. I would like to show you an example of how these languages differ from each other. So here is the English sentence. Would you like to have lunch with me, is how I would say it in English. And I would sign it as you, me, lunch, go. So there's a different grammar there in signed language. And there's another example. The yellow ball is in the cupboard. And in sign language, I would sign the cupboard, ball, yellow, inside. I want to emphasize that there's another grammar in sign language, but there's no one grammar perfect or better than the other grammar of a language. It's just a different grammar. So for example, you could compare the grammar of English with French. Those are also different grammars being used. Something else I'd like to point out is that we're a small but a quite diverse group. The biggest group we have in deaf community is one with additional abilities, so learning difficulties or intellectual disabilities, all those kinds of things. And so the second group is the group where the spoken language of the country is their second language, which I just mentioned. So in the Netherlands for deaf people, Dutch is their second language. And the smallest group on top is the bilingual group, who can sign and speak or write the language equally, but that's quite a small group. So let's focus on designing for the deaf, but actually for everyone. You have to identify the problem first, and then you can recognize exclusion. And then, of course, you can look at inclusive design. But keep in mind that there's no one-size-fits-all, and I will give you some tips for the design, which you could use, and that could also benefit a lot of other people. So first off, which is quite important, writing for the web. And actually writing in general, actually. I will give you a few pointers. And if you use these pointers in your design, it means that the readability will be much improved for deaf people, but also for many others. And I will talk a bit about that now. So 1 in 6 Dutch adults have difficulty in reading, writing, and or calculating. And for deaf people, that's even higher. So it's 70% of the people are functionally illiterate people. And so the dominant language is not their first language, and that's it's that because of that. And so you can use these pointers. I will tell you about these to improve readability. So first off, use headings and subheadings. Make 1 point per paragraph. Use short sentences, so 7 to 10 words per line. Use bulleted lists, such as this one. And use easy, accessible language whenever it's possible. So write in a journalistic style, make your point, and then explain it. And write in an active form. And avoid unnecessary jargon and slang that can increase the user's cognitive load. Also, use images, diagrams, or multimedia for a visual translation of the content. And chunk your content. Use the white space. And one important point is include a glossary for specialized vocabulary and provide definitions in a simpler language. It can be used for medical jargon or legal terminology. Subtitles is, of course, a very good solution. I have to say I love subtitles, but I have to explain the difference between subtitles and closed captions. So subtitles are usually used in a dialogue, and they're representing in written form what the dialogue entails. So usually it's also used to translate into another language. And that is for people who can hear, so they can understand what is said. And closed captions is something different. Actually, every sound is being translated in written form, so not just the dialogue, but also sounds that are heard. And this is a very good solution, I must say. So personally, I love reading. I don't have any problems with reading subtitles or closed captions. But the problem is that there are synonyms used in language, wordplay, or all kinds of jokes, and that can be tough for deaf people to understand them. And usually subtitles go very quickly, so that's hard for deaf people to stay focused and understand it at the same time. And what I said before is that there's no natural written form to sign language. So if you provide subtitles for people who don't have a written form of their own language, then that can be quite a paradox and a problem. But I have to say, generally, subtitles are very valuable to add. And they're widely used, actually. So all the videos online usually have captions. On Facebook, there is an 85% of videos that have being watched without sound with subtitles. And you can see 80% of people who watch videos with closed captions are not deaf or hard of hearing. So actually, you are the users of subtitles and closed captions. So there are many advantages to closed captioning. I will name a few. So the captions make videos accessible for a wider audience. And also for people who are non-English speakers or second language learners, they can be very helpful, and for deaf and hard of hearing people as well. And you probably experienced it yourself when sitting in the train, when you forgot headphones or earphones. You can just watch a video without sound with subtitles. Also important to note for YouTube, for example, is that closed captions can boost the video SEO. Keep in mind, though, that you shouldn't use burned-in captions, but you should add it as an SRT file. And so subtitle has one use, and it's to translate the message, and it's not to test the language knowledge of the audience. So you don't have to literally translate just like this. So if you're watching a tennis game and they say tic-tac in the subtitles, that's usually not necessary. What is also more widely used now is transcripts for videos and podcasts, which works very well, actually. So for deaf or deaf-blind people, they can be transcribed. And I have to say, for the average deaf person, this can be a problem too. Just like I mentioned, so they don't have a natural written form of their own signed language. So it's very hard to read a long transcript, a big chunk of text, and which is also a specific translation of the spoken language too. But I have to say, it is it's a good solution, but keep that in mind when you transcribe. Another option which I really like is multimedia solutions. So the content is being translated by a native signer. And the native signer is a person who is deaf themselves and who is a native, somebody who knows the sign language by birth. And that way, for deaf and hard of hearing people, the site is completely accessible. It does have one disadvantage because it's very costly and time consuming. So if you translate a text and something changes, you have to re-record the whole thing. But I have to say a lot of deaf people really like this option, and also for medical, tough information and legal terminology, all sorts of things, it's a very good solution. Personally, I have to say I'm a very impatient person, so I want to scan a text really quickly and just get the info from that. But for other people, as I can tell, this works really well. So when talking about online forms, I want to ask you to please try to give more options when filling out a form. So give people the option to choose for themselves how they contact you. Do you always have to give up a phone number is something I would want you to ask yourself. So give people the option to write in a comment field and say why they want to be contacted in a certain way. And so for a lot of official instances or organizations, they have a do not reply email, or they always just give up a phone number. And I have to usually go to a contact form again and back and forth just to get in touch. And it takes a lot of time, so please try to avoid this. And this is something which is quite important. So when you have a contact form, when you're ordering something or you're trying to ask a question, usually it's obligatory to give up a phone number. So you have your name, your email, and your phone number, and it's all required. And this is something I really don't like, because I have to give in my phone number, and I will tell you why I don't like it, because this is what happens. So this is a capture of my phone, and you can see I was called about how many? Let me count. 9 times in total by a phone number, and it was all about, I think, in a time period of 4 days. So it was the same phone number calling me over and over again, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't do anything with it. So it's a nuisance to have this happen to you. Which is something that is very positive right now, that many municipalities, for example in Utrecht in the Netherlands, they actually give an option to get in touch with them through a sign language interpreter. So you can see it right here, that option. So you can make your phone call through an interpreting service, so you don't have to ask an interpreter yourself, but it's already provided. And so this way they take the responsibility for the access. The World Health Organization used to define disability as a personal health condition, but that changed, and now they say that disability is mismatched human interaction. Eva Westerhoff, she has a very nice quote that I wanted to include. It's, "I don't have a disability, but society imposes a disability upon me." And all these examples that I gave you, it's actually others that make things inaccessible to me and to deaf people in general. I wanted to show you and talk to you about design thinking. A lot of designers think about solutions for design, and they want to make sure that people can do their thing online. And design thinking has a total of 5 phases, and it starts with empathize, define, and ideate. Then there is prototype and test. So these are 5 phases of design thinking. And design thinking is a system built on empathizing and empathy, because you can't possibly reach everyone. So you try to empathize and put yourself in the shoes of other people and see where the gaps are for them that you can fill in. But I have to say, I have a bit of an allergy for the word empathy. Because people are trying to figure out solutions for the average person. They try to empathize with them. But I already mentioned before that empathizing is dangerous, because can you really imagine what it's like to be deaf or blind? So trying to mock or trying to figure out what it's like to be a disabled person, how they interact with a website or online, but somebody doesn't really experience the life themselves, that can be hard. And of course, empathizing what it's like sort of for a person can be a possibility, but you have never really experienced what it's like to live like a deaf or a blind or disabled person. So people try to impose their own perspectives, and they don't ask actual disabled people to talk about their experiences. Usually people are scared to talk to people with disabilities. They are scared to interact with us, and usually they would prefer to empathize and think about what it's like to close their eyes for an hour and then pretend that they're blind. But usually it's better just to ask people to join and interact with them, because there are no stupid questions. I would actually rather have you pose stupid questions than just assume things. So please ask us, and not just ask us, but ask with us. Actually, I would prefer that. So try to learn from the people who have been excluded. And the user that you have, that's the expert. It's actually not you, but your user. And thinking of good questions for yourself are good, but also for others. So have I designed something for me, or have I designed something for the others? And what are my biases is also something to think about. It's very rare to find organizations who actually think about including people in their designs and who ask people to be at their table, but it's actually very valuable to do that, to make use of your users. And designers, they make designs, but they make designs for people who are disabled, but eventually turns out that they don't make a lot of use of that. But it's better just to ask us to be there, to be at your table and design together, and just ask the disabled community to join in. And something to keep in mind as well is that people from the disabled community usually provide a lot of information, and then they get a thank you, and then the design is made and delivered. But that's a shame. In the future, they could actually have a career in design, maybe, if you could actually just include us in all the steps of design. And that way you can also provide a better design if you work with us. I used to say designing for the deaf, and then for everyone actually, but I think it's better to say it this way, to design with the deaf. And to design with us all, actually. It's just a human right to be heard. But actually, I miswrote that. I should say, it's just a human right to be included. We have a right to sit at the table. I want to show you a short video, and I really hope the sound will be working. So let's check that. No sound? Okay. Oh well. Yes. I found this video on YouTube, and I have to say, you can see these two students who are so creative and they thought of this product, but so many things went wrong with this. So their choice of words is very poor. So they're talking about deaf and mute, about the disabled community. That's not how I see myself. And also these gloves are only a one-way direction. So I would be signing, and then it would be translated, and if somebody talks to me, I wouldn't get them, so it's not actually communication that way. And so they're talking about the ASL community, basically. That's how they designed it, but not everybody uses ASL as a sign language. And I have to say, sign language is such a rich language. It's culturally bound. It's relying on facial expressions and body and arm movement. And this glove is like signing like a robot, basically. And just doesn't work like that. And so every year, constantly every year, there's a video posted online or an article about people who thought about a sign language glove, but it just doesn't work. Like, why am I not presenting here with these gloves on then? So many people, they invent something, they design, develop something based on their own perspective and their own assumptions and their own framework, and they don't really talk with the disabled community that will use the product, so ask them. And so everybody uses their own framework. And we designers, we try to think of solutions that work well and that improve lives. But the problem is that you use your own perspective as a baseline. And it's well meant, but it doesn't work for everyone, and maybe work for someone, but not everyone. So you're working from your ability bias, and you have personas, and you could empathize, and then you would be finished with your design. But I would rather have you co-design with us. So I would rather not be a persona the whole time. So please ask us to be at your table. Just let us design with you. And designing not for, not with people can lead to exclusion. So I would like to conclude my talk with this quote by James Charleston: "Nothing about us without us." Thank you.